So how does a city last for nearly 3,000 years? I mean, not just as a place on a map, but as a real center of power and ideas. That's the story of Rome, and it's basically a masterclass in survival and adaptation. Let's dig into how it was done.
History usually follows a pretty predictable pattern, right? Power gets concentrated, these incredible cities like Babylon or Thebes are built, and they completely define their era.
And then, just as predictably, that power fades. Empires crumble, trade routes shift, and those once great cities, well, they become ruins, or maybe a footnote in a history book. It's just the natural cycle of things.
But there's always one city that seems to play by a totally different set of rules. It breaks the cycle. It endures.
So that's the real puzzle, isn't it? And let me tell you, it is not magic, and it is definitely not just luck. It's a strategy, a method for survival that is baked right into its very identity.
Okay, so here it is. This is the key to understanding Rome's whole deal. It survived by letting go of what it was in order to hold on to the fact that it was. Think about that. Its form of power was always changing, but its position as a power, that was almost always maintained.
To really get this, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. See, Rome didn't start out as some grand imperial dream. Nope, it started as a really practical solution.
Rome's origin wasn't about destiny. It was all about geography. It was a tough, kind of muddy river town that just happened to solve the problems of security and trade better than anyone else around. And that practical, get-it-done mindset, it shaped absolutely everything that came after. And its first really big idea was basically a reaction against its own past. After they overthrew their last king, the Romans pretty much said, never again. So they designed a republic, a system built entirely on the fear of one person having way too much power. It was all about this controlled competition among the elite. And look, it wasn't a democracy like we think of it, but for its time, it was absolutely revolutionary.
And this is how that system got so big. See, Rome didn't just conquer people, it absorbed them. It's a genius move, really. A defeated rival wasn't just crushed, their leaders were actually invited into the system. Rome figured out how to turn enemies into assets. And that, right there, is how a single city became a world-spanning empire.
But of course, a system like that couldn't last forever. The very success of the Republic created this ambition it just couldn't contain, which led to a whole century of brutal civil wars. Out of all that chaos, one man, Augustus, emerges as the first emperor. And just like that, the role of power shifted dramatically, from a shared responsibility to a single absolute authority.
But the real genius of the empire wasn't just the legions, it was the roads, the laws, the aqueducts, the whole idea of citizenship. A merchant in ancient France might never even see Rome, but you can bet he used Roman coins, Roman courts, and Roman roads. Rome wasn't just a place anymore, it was the operating system for daily life across the known world.
But, every empire falls. So when the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed in the 5th century, Rome should have become a ghost town. Instead, it performed its greatest trick yet.
This right here is the key moment of reinvention. The emperors were gone, the armies pulled back, but the city was still there. A Roman temple becomes a church, a public basilica becomes a courthouse. Rome didn't erase its past, it just repurposed it. And the transfer of power was, kind of seamless. As the emperors faded away, the bishops of Rome, the popes, rose to take their place. The city became the seat of the papacy, and it traded the hard power of armies for the soft power of spiritual authority. It exchanged law for legitimacy. The role changed, but the authority stayed in Rome. And boy, did it work. Just think of a medieval king, a guy with armies and castles, kneeling before a pope who has no soldiers at all. Why? Because that pope controlled something even more powerful: legitimacy, salvation, the very idea of order itself. So this constant reinvention created something totally unique. Rome stopped replacing its past and just started accumulating it. It became a city of visible, tangible layers.
You can see this literally everywhere. A Renaissance church using columns they pulled from an ancient temple, Michelangelo using classical Roman forms to design St. Peter's Basilica. The empire's whole aesthetic becomes the visual language of the church. You see, power, as Rome teaches us, likes to wear familiar clothes.
Even in the modern era, this habit just kept going. When Italy was finally unified and needed a capital city, Rome was the obvious choice. But they didn't flatten it to build a new, modern city like Paris.
They just moved in. They absorbed all the messy, complicated historical layers exactly as they were. And that's the Rome you see today, isn't it? Traffic swirling around ancient ruins, apartment buildings looking out over imperial forums. And you might think that's neglect, but it's not. It's coexistence. The city doesn't put its history behind a velvet rope. It uses it as a living room.
So, what can we take away from this incredible story of survival? What is the ultimate lesson from Rome?
Well, it really comes down to these three things. First, survival isn't about being unchanging. It's about being adaptable. Second, authority is like a current. It can be rerouted, not just switched off. And finally, the past is never really past. It just becomes another layer of the present.
And you can see these lessons for yourself. Next time you're there, look for it. Look for the buildings made of other older buildings. Notice that epic, monumental ruin right next to a tiny little cafe. See how one single city block can contain ancient, medieval, and modern history all at once.
And at the end of the day, that's the secret. Rome didn't survive by preserving its past in glass cases. It survived by living in it, building on top of it, and becoming a living, breathing continuation of its own incredible story.